it's hard enough for most people to imagine being in jail, now try to imagine being in solitary confinement. If you can't, that's because prisoners who've experienced it say there's no way to fully capture how horrible it is. Back in May, former death row inmate Damien Echols told me about the lingering anxiety he suffered from being in solitary confinement.
For the last decade before I got out, I was in solitary confinement. They say you're in your cell for 23 hours a day. You're taken out for 1 hour. But out, what that actually means is they take you out of your cell and put you in another cell. I wasn't exposed to sunlight in almost 10 years. It's part of what destroyed my vision. I had next to no human contact for almost 10 years other than with guards who wanted to hurt me. So coming back out into the world, into mainstream society, you know, people just think you're going to be happy and excited that you're out of prison, and you are, but at the same time there is an incredible amount of anxiety and stress and fear that goes along with it, that it takes a long time to work your way through.
Now, State Senator James Eldridge wants to pass legislation that would stop prison staff from disciplining inmates with solitary confinement for long periods. Supporting that legislation are my two guests, Jose Bou, a former prisoner who spent time in solitary about a decade ago, and Leslie Walker, Executive Director of Prisoners Legal Services. Welcome.
Thank you.
Well, Jose, I imagine you can identify with Damien Echols, just because you spoke about it in the Globe, too, about the incredible anxiety, even when somebody would just come to the door.
Absolutely. That's something I took away from what he was saying, is the anxiety that is created is almost like a rubber band being stretched, and then when the door is open, it gets flung out the door. At Jose Bou, particularly, where I did my solitary confinement, I can't compare to other guys who are in DDU or his case, but mine, as little as it was.
How long was it?
It was for 2 years.
2 years in solitary?
Two years at the Jose Bou, which is just by the nature of the classification as solitary, because it was 21 to 20 hours lockdown facility, just if you were classified there. Mm-hmm. And just getting out of the cell after having been in there for a considerable amount of time and having to run for the phone and run for the shower and compete with other guys who had just been locked down the same amount of time, it was very anxious time.
Mm-hmm. Leslie, one of the things that Senator James Eldridge is saying is that too often solitary is used for disciplinary purposes, and they admit that. I mean, you know, they're saying sometimes it's for prisoner safety. I don't know what it was in your case, but most of the time it's for all these rules and infractions, but it goes on for far too long, and that they use it. I mean, there's just too many guys in that situation.
Right. The bill would affect tremendously the Departmental Disciplinary Unit, or the DDU, at Cedar Junction, Walpole, which is a special 124-bed unit, separate building on the grounds of Cedar Junction, where prisoners can be sentenced for up to 10 years in solitary confinement for disciplinary infractions. And often they tack on more time or lose time before the release for throwing a food tray on the floor, something non-violent but a rule infraction. What the bill would do was to put us in line, Massachusetts in line with very much of the rest of the country. Only 2 states that we're aware of have this kind of long-term disciplinary segregation, and allow people to have an ability to work their way out. Right now, if you're in a fight, you get sentenced to the DDU for 5 years. You do 5 years at least. To be able to go somewhere, the DDU even, the building, and say, all right, you're out of control right now. Here's your plan for how to work your way out. But to have the incentive to be able to work your way out and have some due process, some ability, some hope is the hope of the bill. And we were just at a forum today where Maine is ahead of Massachusetts, as is Mississippi, and several other states. And what's happened is there's a reduction in the whole prison system of violence, and there's also a reduction when people get out. They're not so angry for what they've been through.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, Jose, first of all, what did you do all day? What were you thinking about? What was going on?
You know, I was very lucky. I got into reading and I got into studying everything I could. But one thing that's not lost on me is for those who can't read or need education, or they're kind of precluded from that by being locked up. The GED teachers, the ESL teachers aren't coming to your door to teach you anything. So in my case, I was very fortunate to have an outlet, which was...
So they gave you access to reading materials and that kind of thing?
They did at Jose Bou, not if you had a disciplinary infraction. Once you were in the hole for a disciplinary reason. See, I was there for classification reasons, just because of the amount of time I had been given.
And yours was a crime-related, a drug-related crime?
Mine was a drug trafficking case in 1999, and I was classified to Jose Bou in 2000. And so it wasn't that I did anything within the DOC to merit. They just classified it. So, but once I did have problems and caught some disciplinary infractions, then there are no books. If you don't have anybody writing you, or if you don't have a Bible, you're not reading anything. You're basically in an educational void.
And what are you doing all day? Nothing.
You're staring at the wall. You're thinking. Hope if you're lucky, somebody slid a pencil under your floor and maybe some paper. You're writing, maybe. Really nothing. It's really a void of intellectual void.
And what that nothing does is it makes people go mad.
Yeah,
people start hallucinating. Paranoid delusions are very common and not that far in. People start seeing dust kitties when there aren't any. They start hearing voices. The sound of water is painful. The clanging of the doors in the hallway and the guard walking down the hallway is jarring. And the brain is starting to rewire in a very negative way from lack of sensory stimuli, as Damien Eccles says. Every segregation cell in Massachusetts looks at a blank wall.
I mean, some people are going to be listening to this and saying, so what?
Here's the so what. It's incredibly expensive. It's incredibly expensive. It's at least 2, if not 3 times more expensive to have someone in segregation. Number 2, 95% of people are going to be released. And who do you want sitting next to you on the bus? Somebody who was just released from one of these seg units, which happens every day, or at least every week. And number 3, it affects public safety because people are not able to access treatment and programming, as Jose said, when they're locked in seg for months, if not years. So they leave worse than they went in. So it's a matter of money and public safety to reduce segregation to only people who absolutely need to be there, people who are out of control.
Absolutely.
Did you feel yourself, were you angry when you were in segregation? What was that emotion?
Definitely angry. What happens, you end up internalizing what they think of you, and whoever has you locked in, whatever institution, you feel like an animal because they think you're an animal. So you begin to act like an animal, and you change really who you are. It's something that I've been thinking about really in the last few months since Leslie.
I know. I watched some videos today, and actually one of them was solitary confinement in Maine, and it was shot by the Maine DOC, so it wasn't some fabricated thing. It was pretty jarring. A prisoner had essentially gone mad, and they wanted him to take a shower, and they ended up cutting his clothes off him, and
it's
it was
really,
but he had been in segregation.
Absolutely,
right. It is a recipe for mental illness, and if you are mentally ill when you go in, it exacerbates the mental illness. Most suicides occur in segregation, or people who have just gotten out of segregation, and it makes for an incredibly tense environment for staff and prisoners alike. There's a great film, The Worst of the Worst, a documentary done by Yale Law School that we showed at the legislative briefing today, that portrays officers as having been very damaged by the environment, the high level of tension, going and waiting for something to happen all the time, and the high tension level for prisoners as well. Yeah.
All right, well, good luck to you going forward.
Thank you so much, Emily.
Leslie Walker.
Thank you, Emily.